Hey guys, welcome to the show. Another wonderful episode that we have for you here with my buddy Larry Namer. And Larry, what's going on? What's on the news this week?
Well, the big news today was that Bill Cosby got let out of jail, which, came as a total surprise to me.
Yeah.
A court reviewed his sentencing and conviction, actually overturned the conviction, and they let him out. He's out there. And I got to say, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
On one hand, I'm going, he's an old guy. Do we really want him to die in jail? On the other hand, he did terrible stuff.
Yeah.
So, I'd be much more interested in actually hearing from our viewers. I would love to know what you guys think. So if you can, leave comments, send us messages, and let us know how you feel about this stuff, because like I say, I've kind of got some very mixed feelings about this. What do you think?
I just learned about it too, and I'd love to hear your comments. Please put it in the comments down below, and what we could do, Larry, is we could take a look at those comments and maybe talk about it in some of the future episodes, right?
Yeah, and I think if somebody, really has some interesting thoughts about this, I would love to book them as a guest on next week's show, and then we could actually have a dialogue about this, because again, it's very controversial.
Actually, that's a really good idea. So let's definitely do that. Let's see what else is going on. We have so one of the other interesting things that's been happening on the news is regarding Taylor Swift. For me as a recording artist, it's very close to my heart. As you know, Larry, her old record label was sold to Scooter Braun.
Yep.
Right? So now, but when that happened, she never really had the opportunity to buy back her old masters. Now, for musicians, for composers and recording artists, that's very important, because that's a big source of your income, right? So now what she's done is she's re-recording some of her old material, but with the new label, and she's redoing it, and it looks like it's really taking off. So I want to really ask your opinion and your thoughts on that, and what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, again, on this one, I've also got some mixed feelings, because on one hand, I'm very, very much for artist rights, and artists should own their own stuff and benefit for it. And quite honestly, I think that's where this whole NFT world makes it very interesting, because an artist can maintain themselves as part of the income stream on their work.
Right.
But on the other hand, you look at some company, record company, production company, whatever it is investing very heavily in this artist when there's not a lot of revenue and there's not a lot of sales, and they're putting their money at risk behind lots of artists, and then one hits it and then says, "Oh, thank you very much, but I'm going to take my stuff and get out of here." So it's not such a cut and dried picture, I don't think.
No, I understand that, Larry, but just the fact that she, I understand the fact that the record label has spent a lot of money. They obviously made their money back and more. In the case of Taylor Swift, the old label has made a lot of money and became so valuable as a company for Scooter Braun to buy it back, right? So my thinking is, and what are your thoughts about, she didn't even get an offer, to buy back her old masters. Do you think that Scott Bruschetta should have given, or Scooter Braun, both of those guys, should have given her an opportunity to buy back her old masters?
I think if the masters were being put up for sale, they should have first been offered to her.
Right.
No question. But again, when you look at this, artist development, you're a company, you invest in 50 artists.
Yeah.
And one of them makes it.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that, that one could go off on their own, and yet the record company has to absorb the losses from the other 49? I'm not so sure that's the fair solution.
But do you think that's what's going on in the future? Do you think that the record companies should be able to give artists more rights? Especially now, you brought up NFTs, right? Because now that is really under the control of the artist. or whoever's creating it, if it's a collaboration between a visual artist and a musician or a composer, what are your thoughts for record labels in the future, and what they should be how they should be handling artists? Now, before you answer, I'm just letting you know, based on what I'm seeing, the model is pretty much the same so far. I mean, I don't see a major shift. So I just want to get your
Yeah, I
thoughts
think,
on it.
you know, it's a tough thing, and again, I'd love to hear what the viewers have to say, and then I think we take this up next week, but I'd love to have viewer input. Why don't we just go to our next guest, or our first
Yes.
guest, because it's amazing that we actually got him.
Yes. So we'll be right back with an amazing guest.
The reason why I created Hair Dope is because hair colors are popping everywhere. A lot of people, your favorite rappers, your favorite singers, your favorite artists, whoever, they're dyeing their hair, they're doing things like that, and this is a world full of color. So I feel like I want to feel like everyone can express themselves through my color. Well, to me, the importance of entrepreneurship is having a career that's longevity. You know, a lot of people jump into the game and into careers of being an entrepreneur and not having longevity in what they're doing. So that's what I really feel like. You have to put your all into it. It has to be from the heart. You have to have longevity. You have to be able to stay in and stay active.
Well, welcome back, and today we have a very, very special guest we're honored to have, and I'm going to have Larry introduce our next guest.
Sure, George Chakiris. I actually been in some of my favorite movies of all time. I'm thrilled that we have you here because I'm a fan. You've been in this business, I understand, since you were a kid.
Pretty much, yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? How did you get into the business to begin with?
Well, let's see. As a kid, I watched movies and all that stuff. I knew nothing about business, or the show business or anything like that. Nobody in the family had that experience or was in that field. It was just something I fell in love with, like so many kids did as a kid. And the way I fell into it was I started taking dance classes, ballet classes, at a wonderful school on Hollywood Boulevard called the American School of Dance. And that was a very serendipitous thing because, and the reason I went to that school was I had heard that Chakiris took class there. So that's all I had to hear. So that's how I started. I started taking class there. I started working as a dancer in Hollywood movie musicals and so on. And then eventually I got to audition for Jerry Robbins in 1958 for the London company of West Side Story, and that was the lucky shine.
Yeah, that's amazing. So there were some pretty amazing people besides, you, of course, but besides you, Rita Moreno and stuff like that. You had an incredible cast. How long did it really take them from when you found out about the movie to the time they put it together?
I was doing the show, the play in London, playing Riff, and then I played, of course, Bernardo in the movie, and I got a leave of absence of 10 weeks from the play to do the movie. I worked on the movie for 8 months, and they had already been in rehearsal when I got there, and when I finished working after 8 months, there was still more filming to do. So it basically took about a year from the first day of rehearsal to the last day of filming. And then, of course, there was post-production and all that stuff. But it really was a year.
Wow, that's amazing. And what would you say was the most challenging thing for you to be on that movie? Because it's an amazing movie.
Well, to me, the most challenging and the most beautiful thing in the theater and in the movie was working with Jerry Robbins. Jerry, of course, conceived, choreographed, and directed the theater version, and he co-directed with Robert Wise. He co-directed the movie, and of course choreographed the movie as well. And Jerry's presence, if nothing else, was there was something about him that made you really try to bring something to the table yourself and not wait just to be told what to do. There was something, he was always smiling. There was nothing he said to do. It was just, it was sort of built into the fabric somehow. You just felt, we all felt, that our main objective in a way was to, if we could please Jerry, we thought we were hopefully on the right track.
Yeah. Well, I got to ask you this. Did you get a chance to watch this new movie called In the Heights?
Yes.
Because it reminded me so much of the feel of like when I first saw West Side Story. I just thought it was, something revealing and new and fresh and stuff like that. I'd love to hear your opinion of that.
My opinion on the Heights and so on?
Yeah.
Well, listen, first of all, Lin-Manuel Miranda has done some pretty incredible stuff. Hamilton and before that as well. And I have not seen In the Heights yet, but I did see a trailer, and just seeing that trailer made me think I've got to see this movie. I'm gonna love it.
Yeah.
I really expect that when I sit and look at that screen, I'm gonna love it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I was waiting for it. And again, when I saw it, it just, I just had a smile, and it just reminded me in so many ways of West Side Story and, the roles that you guys played and the way you adapted that. It was a fun thing to watch.
I'm not sure, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it just because somewhere I seem to have heard it. When he first did In the Heights in the theater, I think he had been, to some degree, influenced by West Side Story, and that kind of makes sense. But he certainly moved on from that. But these wonderful guys, Jerry Robbins, Lin-Manuel Miranda, who are so gifted, they're producers, and they're directors. They're all three on the. Really sorry that we lost Michael Bennett, because he was one of those. Michael Bennett did everything, and to have a single person wear all those hats and wear them so perfectly and so beautifully is rare, and it's a great happenstance,
Yeah, George, I wanted to ask you, going back to you, obviously we're big fans, Larry and I, and we really appreciate all the great work you've done. Now, going back to your dancing days, you started out, is that how you started out? Would you consider yourself more of a dancer because you started as a dancer, and obviously you're a great actor and your music and everything, but is that what really got you into business, was starting with dancing?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing I ever studied was dance, was ballet.
Right.
So I suppose in a way I absolutely do think of myself as a dancer, because that's the way I started. I've always loved it, and I've not taken class the way I used to for a while. But a day without class just wasn't a good day. So I love dancing. I love dancers. I appreciate how hard they work to be able to do what they do. But I think I do first and foremost think of myself as a dancer, and but subsequently, of course, because of opportunities I had, I was able to also think of myself as a singer and as an actor as well.
So you took singing lessons, obviously, or that came to you more naturally? It looks to me, at least, you're such a natural dancer that would you consider, so you started out as a dancer, and then did you become interested in taking more singing lessons and acting lessons to kind of move on and do a musical theater?
Yeah, it sounds really terrible to say things about yourself, but singing came, I would say, came naturally to me as well. In fact, as a kid, I sang in two boys' choirs, one in Tucson, Arizona, and one in Long Beach as a voice soprano. But I remember listening to the radio and hearing Helen Forrest, who was a big singer in the 40s, and I thought, I think I sound as good as her. Arrogant stuff to think, but with singing, you can hear yourself. So sort of, you hear yourself, so you can gauge it in some way. But I loved singing. I loved singing. In fact, one of my favorite theater shows was doing a Stephen Sondheim show called Company. I did it for a year.
Yeah.
Her primary tour is it's a great score. Larry Kurtz originated that role. And
yeah, of course.
And I got to do it for a beautiful year with Elaine Stritch.
Oh, wow!
Yeah, working with Elaine, beautiful is not enough. It was one of the best times I've ever had because of her.
And that's when you put everything together, right? You're dancing, you're singing, you're acting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because in that one, and by the way, in that one, Bobby, the character, Larry and I, the leading role is the character is called Bobby, and there was no dancing in Company at all. But when I was doing it, Michael Bennett did put in a little bit of a dance thing in the opening number, side by side, just for me, not for me, but because of me. And so I did get to dance a little bit in that one, and I love what Michael did, of course.
Yeah. Well, this year I think it's coming up in August, it's the 59th anniversary of Marilyn Monroe's death. And
wow,
isn't that amazing? It seems like just
I know, yeah.
And you've actually met her. You were in like 2 or 3 movies with her, weren't you?
Well, I got to be behind her a couple of times. First, the most important one, I guess, is I was one of the guys behind her in Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend from Gentlemen for Blondes, choreographed by the incredible Jack Cole.
So we were talking about your experience with Marilyn and stuff. How many movies were you in with her? It was a few.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
How many movies were you in with Marilyn? Because it's more than one.
I was an extra in How to Marry a Millionaire for a whole day.
Right.
I was in Gentlemen for Blondes and that incredible number. And I was one of the guys in the number that Robert Alton did for her that she never did because Jack Cole did it. Robert Alton's version of the Heatwave number, and I was around her a couple of other times. Just one was there was a party at the end of a rehearsal day for No Business Like Show Business, and we were all invited to it. So it was on a sound stage, and all the kids got to come too. So it was great. And again, she arrived with a couple of gentlemen. I keep saying it, but it's what happened. Very quietly. She drew no attention to herself, but she was just very quiet. She was just there. And the girl who was my dancing partner in that movie, Drusilla Davis, great friend, she said, "Why don't I go over and ask Marilyn to give you a kiss on the cheek?" And I said, no. But Drusilla did it anyway, and Marilyn was in earshot, and so Drew goes over to and says, would you give that boy a kiss on the cheek? And Marilyn, very sweetly, just calmly and simply looked in my direction. She said, but I don't know him. I love that.
That's crazy. That's funny. That is really funny.
One other thing, but there's an 8x10 still black and white picture. Dan Daly, Donald O'Connor, Johnny Ray, Mitzi, and on the right Marilyn, and they're all just waiting. Nobody's saying anything. They're just waiting to work. On the right side, Marilyn is talking to a little kid. I love that. She's talking to a little kid, and she, I think those things say a lot about her, and I've always thought if I knew her, I would like who she is. I thought she was kind, and that's the big one. I think for me, I thought she was sweet and kind and good.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, like I say, it's the 59th anniversary of her death, and she's, just larger than life. She's as big as ever. But before we wrap up, I have to ask you these questions. You look amazing. How do you do it?
Oh, My God, thank you.
Yes, we were just talking about that when we got, a little while ago.
Well, I'm not a natural blonde. For a start, you know what? I think it's exercise. I think it's dancing. Almost every dancer I've ever known and still knows, first of all, I've never gained weight. I've always been sort of on the slim side, and I think that helps. And I've always been a strong believer in moisturizers and that stuff because it just feels right to do it. And that's basic. And also, I think, genetically, I was lucky because of my family, my mother and my father, especially my mother. My mother lived to be 104.
Wow.
And she was something else herself, Yeah.
What it also helps that you're a handsome guy too.
Well, the good genes, I guess, is what I think of it just talking about this.
Yeah.
But on my mother's side, especially, I think good genes. Yeah.
Sure. Well, George, we really want to thank you. This has been quite fun for us, an honor, and it's amazing to see you looking as good as you are. And
thank you.
We wish you many, many more years, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, George.
Pleasure.
Really, it was a lot of fun. Yes, thank you.
I really enjoyed talking to both of you. Thank you so much.
Take care, George.
Okay.
Thank you, George.
Okay.
Well, we have another special guest in the studio today, my friend Richard L. Anderson, who's an Oscar-winning sound designer, and now he does and directs his own feature films. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here,
Yes.
guys.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So you've been working on some new stuff. Tell us what's the latest and the greatest.
Well, I have this movie called Lead the Way. It's sort of a dramedy about a Asian American man who's legally blind and has Asperger's syndrome, which is a form of autism, and he decides to run for president. So, and he's not doing very well until a Native American woman discovers him and decides she's going to help. And this wonderful guy here did the music. It's beautiful. You should watch it just for the music.
So when did you shoot this? You shot it during COVID?
Yeah, we shot it starting in last September, in sort of the thick of the COVID. They had permitted us to start shooting again, but it was still going on. So we had to wear masks and those plastic face shields, and you had a minimum amount of people you could have in the room at the time. If you're shooting indoors, but the actors could take their masks and things off, because the movie is supposed to take place in a generic time where there is no COVID.
Got it.
It was interesting because when we were having lunch and he told me about the film that he's about to shoot a film, I was like, okay, just we'll talk afterwards, because I wasn't sure how serious he is. Then a couple months later he calls me, he's like, oh, I'm done with the movie, remember? I was like, wow, that's incredible that you were able to get it done during, this was when, so what was it like? The regulations that you had to go through, right?
Well, I don't know all the regulations because I was an executive producer, but we had a line producer who dealt with most of that. But I know we got tested like at least every other day COVID test, and we had to like separate. Everybody kind of had to eat lunch at separate little areas, so you couldn't like sit with your friend and get close. And like I said, you could only have so many people in the room with the actors at one point. So it was difficult, and like I mentioned, the masks and things like that.
And so what kind of budget was this movie done on?
Lower budget. I don't want to say because that might affect somebody's view of the movie. It's certainly not a $20 or $100 million movie, but I think it looks damn good.
Yeah,
I
I had all these jokes prepared. I had all more jokes. I was going to say you must have had a really low budget because you had to hire Omar.
Yeah.
as opposed to getting a real music guy.
Right.
As opposed to an Oscar winner.
Right. By the way, I have to say another thing about Omar thing is when I told him what our budget was for music, and then after I got him up from fainting, he said later, I didn't realize it was a feature film. I thought it was just going to be a short.
Yeah, I did.
And that is true. Where are we going to see this and when?
I hope soon. We're looking for a distributor, so all you distributors out there, give me a call. No, we're looking for distribution. I think they might get some theatrical. I think it's mainly going to be an online movie, VOD, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and we have the trailer where we're gonna play it.
Oh, okay,
in just a little bit. But going back with how you started in this business, you started as a sound designer, correct? With
right.
And you obviously.
Well, I started like everybody else, of course, as somebody's assistant.
Right.
That's how you start.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, my first professional job was I was hired by Jimmy Hong, who's a famous Asian American or Chinese American character actor. Probably at this point, he's most famous for being the voice of the Kung Fu Panda's father. But he was been in a million movies and TV shows over the years. So in '73, this is right when Bruce Lee and all the whole Kung Fu thing sort of hit America, and they were like, wow, these movies are cool. And of course, China said, you like them? We got tons of those movies. So a lot of distributors started to pick these movies up. And but because Americans tend to be very lazy, they don't like to read subtitles, so we had to loop them all into English. And so Jimmy had seen a student film I'd done where we cheated in dialogue that was shot with non-sync sound equipment, and he was impressed, so I got hired to be on the movie.
And that's at USC, right? You went to USC?
I went to USC Cinema, yes.
Wow.
Back before it was a school, it was a school, but now it's a what do you call it? A separate. No, I think they call it a school now. We were just a department in those days. Yes.
Was that at the same? That was before or after George Lucas and them went?
George Lucas had already been there.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Because I remember when I was there, American Graffiti premiered.
Okay.
So that was what?
73, I think.
No, I think 72 or something like that.
Didn't you work on the second American Graffiti?
I did. I worked on the sequel called More American Graffiti. Yes, which was an interesting film because it was shot in 4 different formats.
So
each had 4 stories, and each one was shot in a different film format.
So I'm going to make believe I know the answer to this, but I'll ask the question on behalf of our viewers. What is a sound designer?
Okay, a sound designer is a term that sounds real highfalutin, and people started using it in the maybe 70s or 80s. Before that, we were called supervising sound editor, and to be honest, that's the credit I pretty much took for my entire career. The supervising sound editor is the person who's in charge of the post-production part of the sound, designing, as it were, all the sounds that go in the movie besides the actor's voice. And of course, we're also in charge of fixing up the dialogue in case something happened on the set. It was noisy. It's a period movie set in 1860 and they shot next to a freeway or something like that. So where you have to loop the actors, or just various noises and bumps and things like that that you have to clean out of the dialogue. But then the main thing is that you have to design the sound of the world that you're in. Now, if you're in a studio like this, of course, it's pretty quiet. So you don't have to add very much anything. Maybe if I did something on the tabletop, whatever. Sorry for the sound guy. Anyway,
Johnny told us not to do that specifically.
oh, bad. Anyway, the point is, whatever the sound it would be, like, we would add that in because now. But it also, let's say, instead of being in a studio, we were in a spaceship headed on the outskirts of our solar system. Well, what would that sound like?
Do you sample those sounds yourself, or you can get them? I mean,
well, there's more libraries available now. When I started, there was limited libraries that are available, certainly to an independent person. So we tended to go out and just record a lot of stuff ourselves. I remember I was working on the first Star Trek movie called Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and we were in a screening room at Paramount and waiting. They were going to run the movie, and I remember listening to the room and saying, "Wow, this is a nice air conditioning or sound, just there's nice sound in the room." I said we should record this, and it can be one of the rooms in the Enterprise. Well, it became such a big deal with all the union regulations and things working on the lot that we were never able to do it. So
they won't let you record the sound?
No, you had to hire a sound crew to do it, and you had to hire them for a minimum of a half a day with at least two people, and we needed like 30 seconds to a minute of sound.
What a difference, right, Larry, between then and now? I mean, now you could go on your iPhone and do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you go to school to be a sound designer? Or
I went
is
to
it
film
part of
school. I went to film school to learn how to make movies.
Got it.
Now we did have some sound instruction, and of course you kind of get in the thick of it when you have to do your sound student films and try and figure out how to make them sound like a Hollywood movie. But no, most of it was on the job training. Either I have a task, a problem in front of me, and how am I going to fix it? Or when I first started, there was some of the old timers who'd tell me, "Oh, okay, kid, look, here's what I do this, and it's going to be, it'll be okay."
Yeah. Now with all this new.
Oh, and I might add too, when I went to film school, everything was film,
Right.
and magnetic film and celluloid film for the picture, and everything was physical. When they talk about cutting a film, you cut the film. Now it's all on computers. Everything, it's all digital. It's all virtual.
So now with all this product out there and this latest technology, and literally, as Omar said, you could film on an iPhone stuff. What have you seen that you looked at and said, "Wow, that's really impressive," in terms of like what the sound was in the movie that might have impressed you?
Oh boy, I'm trying to think of what in the last couple of years. There's a lot of subtle things in Mank.
Okay.
They did a lot of subtleties there, but those, I think that's beyond most people's comprehension. Maybe there's a lot of stuff you can do with sound that's affects people on a subconscious level.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true of films in general. If people know what you're doing, then you kind of point that it's a movie. But if it's affecting people on a subconscious level, because most people once the movie starts and and they sort of forget that it's a movie, and they kind of get caught up in it. Because if you're constantly thinking, oh, it's just a movie, oh, that guy's an actor, oh, there's a camera just offside, then like the scary spooky scene where maybe the monster's going to jump out and get him isn't funny. Isn't scary because it's like there's a big crew right next to the guy.
Right.
So what makes
But let me tell you a story about sound. Okay.
Yeah.
I was working on, what was it called? Batman Returns, and there was
Tim Burton, right?
Yeah, Tim Burton directed it, right? And there was a scene in, I think the character was Max Schreck's office. It was played by Christopher Walken, and Max Schreck, of course, was a reference back to the actor in the original Dracula of 1920. But anyway. He had an office, and he was sort of a bad guy, and Bruce Wayne was in the office as Bruce Wayne, not as Batman. And I just wanted the office to be creepy and unsettling. There was nothing. There was no big threats or anything like that. Everything was sort of on a subliminal level. But so I came up with this sound, and at this point I don't remember what it was. So, but I put it in, and we pre-mixed the thing, and we're doing the final mix, and Tim's listening, and he's like, kind of reacting, and he said. What's that sound? I explained what I want. I said, that's in there because it's supposed to I want the audience to feel uncomfortable. And he said, well, it does. Let's get rid of it. So even though it didn't get in the final film, I felt good, though, because it had done exactly what I intended.
How much of that is your collaboration with the director? I mean, does the director kind of say, okay, just go and mix the sound, or there's with music, obviously there's a lot of directions that comes from, like when you and I were collaborating, we're talking about, and you told me what you wanted as far as the music, but how much of a collaboration you do with the director as a sound designer? I mean, does he get involved, like saying, oh no, when we were banging, let's pretend like we're banging on this table, but if I'm banging on this table, the director would say, no, do it this way or that way, or you just go off and do it yourself?
Every director is sort of different. They have their own comfort level of getting involved. Some are very hands-on, and some are very just do it.
So Tim Burton was hands-on, right?
Yeah, but sometimes there's some of the big things, he just kind of rely on me to come up with something, which is difficult, like in Beetlejuice. Like, what are those sounds of ghosts and weird things sound like? There's certainly nothing you can go out and record. You can't, let's go to our local haunted house and record it.
Did you do Edward Scissorhands?
I did Edward Scissorhands, yes.
That's one of my daughter's favorite movies.
But it's a beautiful film.
Yeah, and so you came up with all the sound for the cutting and all that stuff?
Yes. I worked with a guy named David Stone, who now teaches at, what's it called, South Carolina, SCAD, what's that thing? Not South Carolina, it's in Georgia. Anyway. So Savannah School of the Arts, that's it. Art and Design, that's it. Anyway, we bought like every kind, or borrowed every kind of scissors you can think of, from little barber scissors to those big hedge clippers.
Yeah.
And we did things like put the hedge clippers and some of the big scissors in water, so they'd start to get a little rusty, so they would have more texture to them. Because a lot of equipment, if it's brand new, it's really quiet,
right,
and it has no character to it.
Yeah.
Like
so much of that movie was that,
Right. So we ended up with all these scissors samples. We ended up actually doing that more with a sampler. We had all these different scissors type sounds on keys, and we kind of played them because sometimes he'd start off and do some random little cuts, and then like if he was styling somebody's hair or cutting one of those topiaries on a bush, he'd kind of go like a cartoon where they kind of go like
exactly.
And then it's done, right? So we would kind of play it, those sort of flurries of different scissors.
Well, what were the hardest kind of sounds to recreate for you?
Anything that is not real. Anything, there's something I call the voice of Jesus effect.
Okay.
And this is where you have a sound that is supposed to be like the coolest sound ever, or the voice of God. Sometimes we use it. It's like, well, if God's voice suddenly appeared to us right now, sorry, I was hoping. Anyway, what would God sound like? And we got that on the first Star Trek movie with this character called V'ger, who was like an entire machine planet. And it was like, well, what would V'ger's voice sound like? Or what was a ghost sound like? Or this or that, or what? Anything like that, you could, because there's no answer, and sometimes it's not even a voice like the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill, that kind of voice. I think that was Cecil B. DeMille's voice I heard in the 56 version. Anyway, but if it's something like a sentient being, but it doesn't speak, And if it's like a planet that could be any sound in the world, it's like, well, what is it? You know, if God was speaking, God could speak in a really tiny, quiet little voice. It doesn't have to be booming and, you know, I will smite thee.
Right. Wow.
So generally you just do a lot of stuff. You go with your own and thinking, and then you go, and then they'll listen to it and they'll go, I don't know, because a lot of times the people don't really know what they want. They're hoping you'll come up with something.
Right.
You know, remember when we started the movie and I said to you, I'm really not sure what the music should be on this movie, but we'll figure it out.
So it was part of my job to sort of give you different directions and sort of come up with some ideas where you thought, this is gonna work. And then so I was like, okay, now I kind of figure out that's what you wanted, and I started creating it and going that route. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, Richard. I really appreciate it. You always, every time I sit with Richard, I learn so much. You know, he knows so much about movies. And, you know, we talk about history of movies, and we talk about
and
actors
TV and everything.
TV.
Yeah.
So
I can't wait to see it because I want to see if Richard hired the right guy to do the music.
He's a hack. He's a hack. Don't ever hire him. No, he was great. He was great.
well, we did it because we were limited in time.
Right.
You know, so he calls me up, he goes, the movie's done. And then, you know, you got like 2-3 weeks to do it. You know, and it was like, so I had to come up with like a way to get it done.
And you know, and the London's Philharmonic Orchestra was busy that week, so
Both
we couldn't
busy
get
that
there.
week,
So you got Omar,
So-
yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it because I can't wait to have both of you back again so I can just give you a mic.
Okay, and tear the movie apart.
You got it.
There you go. All right.
Thank you, Richard.
I'll stand up for it.
Thank you,
you.
Richard, very
Thank you
much
for
being
having
on
me.
the show. We'll
Thank-
see you soon.
Start it up.
Welcome back to the podcast, you guys. I want to continue talking about the artist rights, Larry, and especially, you know, nowadays with the emergence of NFTs, right? So what are your thoughts? I mean, we talked about the record labels, and you know, at least for me, in my opinion, the same practices are still going, but now with the NFTs, the artists are finding a new way to get their works out there without going through the traditional record company ways of doing things. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of things have happened. Technology has kind of leveled the playing field a lot because you can make music using your laptop or even your iPhone. But, you know, now you have this emergence of this phenomenon, this NFT phenomenon, which I've been studying this because Fanvestor is going to be introducing NFTs in the fall.
Yeah.
So I've really had to learn a lot about, like, what are the metrics in this? I mean, how do you set up deals? And pretty much the way it's going to work, and from what I've seen out there, let's say you have a piece of music and you want to issue an NFT, which means you're going to give ownership of either the whole piece of music or part of the music or whatever. So, and let's say you sold that piece of music, you know, in your case for $1, but, you know, if it was a real, I'm kidding. But let's say you sold this piece of music for $100,000. Now, in the old days, that would be it. So you sold that music to a record company for $100,000. They may sell it 5 years from now for $10 million. You got nothing out of it. But now with NFTs, it's all tracked on the blockchain. So every time the ownership changes hands, you actually get money. So let's say you sell it for $100,000 and they sell it for $1 million. You would get another 10%. So out of the $1 million, you'd get another 100,000. And then if that person sold it to someone else, again, you would get 10% or whatever that sale was. So as an artist, you're attached to that work of art literally for the life of the work of art. So it's an amazing, opportunity for artists of all kinds, from musician to fine arts and etc.
Which is the opposite of what's going on with the artist now. You don't see anything. You basically get your advance, and you get certain amount of money, and then it's very little, whatever it is, the streaming that they pay you for. But really, you don't see anything. If your art becomes more valuable as you go on, everything pretty much stays the same as an artist. So that's been really the old model. But do you see record companies changing the way they do business because of what's happening in the NFT space?
I think they'll have to.
Yeah.
I think they'll have to, because things will be created as NFTs. And again, it's tracked on the blockchain. It's impeccable kind of tracking, so that you, as an artist, you're always going to know the real numbers, and you're going to be able to stay on the value chain of that work of art for as long as it's out there and being traded. But you go back to probably the most famous thing in music, when David Bowie realized that his music, for every dollar his music made, 87 cents went to the record company and 13 cents went to the artist. David went out and issued Bowie bonds, and he raised money from his fans, and he bought back the library $55 million, paid the fans like an almost 8% dividend. And then, so the fans were thrilled. They were in business with David Bowie. David was now, instead of getting 13 cents on a dollar, he was getting like 92 cents on a dollar.
Yeah.
The fans were thrilled. They made money. So that kind of started everybody thinking how you could create monetary vehicles that will give the artists much more than what they had before. And I think it kind of culminates now with NFTs being out there, because artists will be able to stay on that revenue stream for as long as that work is valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I totally relate to that as a recording artist myself. And, the stuff that I've created in the past, making good money for the record company.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I'm personally interested in, buying back some of my old masters. And that's something that when I talk to artists, a lot of artists are interested in doing that. And I think that's one of the reasons they're getting into the NFT space. But you also see the NFT space going beyond that, right? I mean, getting into ticketing, getting into merchandise.
Equivalent of trading card. When I was a kid, we grew up with baseball cards. That kind of thing, art, prints, whether it be original canvas or, numbered prints and stuff. It just creates this incredible opportunity for the artist to once and for all be able to be treated as fairly as you possibly can in this whole world of transactions.
Yeah, because the artist has never really been traded fairly, at least in my opinion. They've always been taken advantage of. And that's one of the conversations I had with a friend of mine who's a well-known director, Tony Kaye, and we were just talking about that, exactly what you were saying too. That's exactly his sentiment as well, because he's getting into the NFT space as well, and he's also a musician, but he was saying the same thing, that artists are really never really appreciated, and in a lot of sense, in a lot of ways, they've been taking advantage of, right? If we look at it historically. But yeah, I mean, this is a great conversation, Larry. I really appreciate your thoughts on it. And, I'm really excited about our guests for next week. I want to kind of have you introduce one, and maybe I'll introduce the other.
Sure. Next week is going to be interesting, because it'll be a little bit of a departure for us, but not so much. California, Hollywood has been losing business for years. I mean, it's been migrating to Georgia and Louisiana and places where they did aggressive tax rebates and stuff to attract production. And we've got a governor election coming up. And, we've got one of the key issues is how you bring back production business and business in general into the state of California. So we're lucky enough, we've got one of the candidates for governor coming on, Kevin Quall. Kevin is a great believer in, commerce and bringing back business, and he's got a lot of interesting thoughts as to how to make California and Hollywood competitive again. in the world of entertainment. So that's going to be really, really interesting. And then kind of the second part of that, while we have Kevin, it gets even more challenging. And, why don't you talk about that, because you've invited another guest on.
Yes, and the other guest is Dr. Mary Taheri, and she's actually in the Biden-Harris COVID task team. Very, prominent, somebody who's very much into the healthcare system, and she's really doing a lot of great work towards people getting vaccinated. She was actually running the COVID sites in Los Angeles. Some of the largest COVID sites in Los Angeles last year. So we would be, I would, really interested in hearing her thoughts to see what she has to share about that.
Yeah, I've actually spoken to Mary, on several occasions before, and she's a great advocate of providing equality in our healthcare. I mean, particularly during this COVID, where it was clear that you were better off being white during COVID than you were being anything but white. And the number of deaths and sickness was disproportionate to the population in general and stuff. And she's a great advocate for evening out the playing field. So everybody should have good health care. I mean, I know she believes in that. So I would like to see her on with this prospective governor. And just lay it out to him, saying, it's a problem. What are you going to do? And I want to hear what he has to say.
I think that's going to be a great conversation. That's going to be great for all of you guys to hear from these great guests. So, Larry, I want to thank you so much. I can't wait for next week's show. But if you have any comments, please put it in the comments below. We definitely, Larry and I, will read the comments and try to get back to you guys. So, thank you again. We had a wonderful show, and we will see you guys next week.
Great. Bye now.
What's up, it's Omar Akram here, and we're launching Masa with Fanvestor to offer a limited edition, perks, products, and experience to my fans.
I let little shawty come here and take your place.